Cara Collingwood, welcome to the ITA College Tennis Coaches Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, on this podcast, I don't think we've ever talked about nutrition even once. And so I have a bunch of questions here that I'm ready to get into if you're ready to go.
Well, yes, and it's about time. I can't believe you've never talked nutrition. So I'm
Well,
honored, but yes, very happy that we're getting into the topic.
yeah, long overdue. So obviously, this podcast is for college coaches, and those are the individuals that I care a great deal about. We'll definitely get into the student athletes shortly, but I'm interested in how you might advise college coaches to take care of their own health and nutrition. I'm a former college coach for 12 years. Usually by the end of the spring season, which is our dual match season, where you literally don't have a day off for
Yeah.
5 months, I would have maybe 15 or 20 pounds to lose because I've just been eating terribly I've been eating emotionally. If I have a big win, I'm having the cheesecake. If I have a bad loss, I'm eating the cheesecake to console myself. You're traveling all the time at match days. I'd probably eat 10 Lara bars and not even recognize just how much food I've consumed, just kind of that emotional, stressful eating that you go through. So I'm just really, if you have any tips, advice on how coaches can manage that throughout the spring season when probably they're most stressed.
Yeah, well, and I'm so happy for this question because, so many times when I'm talking to tennis coaches, all of the emphasis is on the athletes,
Right.
and so it is good to even just step back and go, you know what? I got to look in the mirror. I got to take care of me. And so I think this is so incredibly important. So I think, number one is just awareness. I think it's awareness of what you just said. So if it's your first year, maybe, going into that, hearing you say, I gained 15 pounds, they're like, wait, what? Uh-oh. So, that might have been that awareness, or someone might be nodding their head going, yeah, that is me. Okay. And so that awareness is key, because then you can start thinking about, what can I do and how can I do it differently? If this has happened to me in the past, what can I do differently? And so what I like to do anytime, you're dealing with an issue like this is sort of totem pole the problems and go, okay, what are the most impactful? So, what is my biggest issue? And let me tackle that and not worry about some of the other little things, because it can be very overwhelming when you start going, oh my gosh, there's this, there's 25 things that I could probably be doing better. Well, what has the most impact? So you mentioned a couple things already. It's not eating, or eating, bars all day long, and, you eat 10 Lara bars. Well, that's 2,000 calories. And then mind, you're like, and I know you might be exaggerating saying 10, or maybe not. But you in your mind, you're like, I haven't eaten anything all day. All I've had is some Lara bars,
Yeah.
because you never sat down and had a real meal. And
Mm.
so I think that's one of my big tips, is make sure you take care of you. Make sure you have breakfast before you leave the hotel. Make sure you have snacks packed in your bag. All the things that we're telling our athletes,
Yeah.
turn the mirror on yourself and go, okay, what's for lunch? It's not just a banana and some Gatorade and some da-da-da. Like, I need to sit down and get a turkey sandwich and, actually get some real food into my body. And so I think that's one of the, that awareness piece of, what is my biggest problem? It's that
Mm.
I don't eat most of the day because I'm running here, there, everywhere. And then at the end of the day, the story I tell myself is, I haven't eaten anything all day. Meanwhile, you just didn't sit down and actually like enjoy it and feel it. So
Right.
I would say, try to get real food throughout the day. Start with breakfast. Don't just leave the hotel with a banana. Make that extra 15, 20 minutes to go downstairs, get the breakfast, get the whatever it is, and always try to think, just like I teach my athletes, there's three things we want at every single meal: some kind of carbs, some kind of protein, and some kind of fruit or vegetable.
Mhm.
So again, that banana is not breakfast. That yogurt is not breakfast. A banana, a yogurt, and a bagel could be breakfast. But
Okay.
trying
Yeah.
to think about, that well-rounded meal, so that I've got the protein to give me energy that lasts. I've got the carb that gives me energy right away. I've got the fruit or vegetable in there to help me with recovery, with protecting my cells, with, all that good stuff too. So, try to think of that at those meals that, yeah, a Lara bar could be part of a meal actually, but what else? It's not the meal. What else? Could I have a protein shake with it? Could I have a banana with it? I mean, you can sort of make a meal out of snacky foods,
Sure.
but in a pinch, but I would say let's plan ahead so that we aren't in that much of a pinch. And then, the other thing that you mentioned is the comfort food, and this can happen in the airports, it can happen in your hotel room, it can happen, out with the team where you're like, oh, I'm just bored, I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm celebrating, I'm happy, I'm, all those reasons why we eat.
Yeah.
And so I think, when you're just out to dinner once in a while, you can have the fun stuff and order dessert and whatever. But when this is a lifestyle of months on
Yeah.
the road, yeah, we can't get the fettuccine alfredo, all you can eat, whatever stuff all the time and order dessert and so I think just being smart about what you're ordering, because yeah, this is adding up day after day after day after day. And looking at sort of that, I always try to have my clients think about the why around it, and what kind of energy am I going to have for tomorrow if I load myself up with too much tonight or feel guilty about that cheesecake, or you want to be at your best for
Yeah.
the athletes but also at your best for you. And so I think turning it back to thinking about why should I not order the cheesecake, not just, and it's not just about the calories, but it's more about how am I going to feel afterwards,
Right.
emotionally, mentally, physically, and try to connect it back to, what your performance and your energy is going to be like.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question, because tennis coaches as well, or college coaches, they spend long days on the court. They're a little different. If you're the soccer coach, you're not really doing any individual practices. You've got your 2 to 4 practice with the team. You're probably not running around, sprinting around, chasing balls down. You're in the middle of the field with your whistle. But
Right.
college coaches are typically quite physical on the
Yeah.
court. And when I coached, you might have a few hours individual lessons in the morning. You have your team practice where you might be jumping in. You might be doing a conditioning session with the team. And then you could be teaching lessons in the evening or afternoon, whether those are individual lessons with adults or kids or whatever it is. So again, you have long days, and I guess it's that back to back, and what can you do during those days to, like you said, feel good the next day and the day after and the day after, sleep well, put yourself in position where you can do that day after day, month after month, and year after year, so that your body isn't breaking down when you get into your 40s or 50s, whatever it is, when you've been doing it for a couple of decades. So do you have any advice on how coaches can manage both their nutrition and hydration? Again, in certain parts of the country, you could be in April and you're sweating all day and all the rest of it, you get it. So any advice along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, same thing that we just talked about, that you got to take care of you. And unfortunately, I have 2 P words that people don't like to hear or do, and it's planning and preparation. And, because we tend to be very reactive when it comes to eating, when it comes to, taking care of ourselves, and we don't think about it until it becomes a problem. And like you said, if I am very reactive in my hydration and my nutrition, then I am going to get behind, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to get injured, and that's not going to serve anyone. And so planning ahead, preparing some things. So whether that means food prep to bring with you, whether that means when you're on the road, packing your protein powder, your vitamins, your sleep mask, your, whatever, like all those things that help you to get that good night's rest, to stay hydrated, throughout the day, whether it's a special water bottle you like that you tend to like to drink out of, whether it's bringing your own electrolyte, or we're going to get into that a little bit too, in
Yeah.
terms of hydration, but bringing those things with you instead of just relying on the venue to have it, or it's only for the athletes, so I don't feel like I deserve it. Yeah, you do. You have to. You're running around
Yeah.
crazy and you're sweating and you're, exerting, and you also, you need to treat yourself like one of the athletes. And so, preparing ahead of time and bringing all that stuff with you, whether it's for the day when you're practicing, from your home, or whether it's, again, when you're on the road and packing that suitcase with those things that are necessary. If you're at work and you can pack, a little cooler in your office or something with yogurts and protein shakes and fruit and, things for the week. And that way, that they're there and you can go grab them easily, or have that, big Yeti cooler full of stuff that you're just eating as the day goes on. But I think the planning and the preparation, the thinking ahead of time, and recognizing that you deserve it, it's not a choice, it's a necessity. I
Yeah.
have to take care of myself so that, like you said, I can keep doing this. Just like our athletes have a very short career, some of
Mhm.
them, some
Yeah.
of them much longer, but
Sure.
a professional athlete or a collegiate athlete, you can only perform for a certain number of years. But as a coach, yeah, this is your career. This could be 30 years
Yeah.
that you continue after you've already had a collegiate or, pro career. And so now, you're looking at, how can I keep my joints and my, so it's supplements, it's, thinking about how can I make sure that I'm, doing this on a regular basis, but holding yourself accountable to that.
Yeah. And have you been around coaches that you feel like have demonstrated positive habits for their athletes that they're working with, or what? How can coaches, I guess, adopt more healthy habits? And because oftentimes, yeah, coaches can say all these things about good habits, but then don't necessarily demonstrate it themselves. I mean, do you have,
Yeah.
again, any advice on how coaches can start taking some steps that will potentially influence their athletes moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like parenting, right? When you've got these college kids, you're part parent, you're part counselor, you're part coach,
Sure.
you're part, everything. And so, that is, treat yourself as if you are, and we know based on research that, coaches are someone that kids look up to, even in the collegiate environment and pro environment. Someone, they take their advice more than they take their own parents' advice. So, and
Mm.
watch what you're doing, even at this level. We know that a 5-year-old is watching their parents, but
Yeah.
even these college kids definitely are watching what we're doing. And so if you're saying one thing and then doing another, that's definitely mixed messages around that, because again, you do need to take care of yourself too. So I think the more you can role model the actual behaviors, saying, oh no, I'm, do not disturb on my phone, I need to get to bed, not bothering people after a certain time, because they need to get their sleep and you need to get your sleep, and role modeling some of those things, like don't text me after whatever time you guys decide, or making sure that you're following that same advice, that you're not doing the same thing to them and expecting a response back that could be waking them up. And same thing with the hydration and mentioning it, but not putting it in their face, but like, hey, I'm also, I'm asking you to do this, but I'm doing it for myself. Look at my cooler that I've got, this is what I do every day. This is how I keep myself healthy, trying to also vocalize some of the behaviors that you're doing to keep yourself healthy, I think is good role modeling, not, rubbing it in their face, but just gently showing. But, words are nothing compared to actions. And so if they see you doing those things, they will believe that, yeah, that coach walks the walk, not just talks the talk.
Yeah. Excuse me, Tara. So with a lot of our coaches do not have access to nutritionists at their universities. They might have a strength and conditioning coach who's managing 6 different sports and not just tennis. And so, how do you advise coaches to have conversations with their student athletes, or informed conversations about nutrition and healthy nutrition, especially as it relates to their performance?
Yeah.
Or should they avoid these conversations completely if they don't have an educational background
Yeah.
in this topic?
Yeah, no, this is hard because, this is this is one of the things in my profession that we talk about all the time, that everybody's an expert because everybody eats. So everyone thinks they're an expert on nutrition because we all eat. But obviously, if you have a sports dietitian that you have access to, use them and abuse them, not abuse them, but use that person as much as possible. Have them come in and do team talks, set up individual meetings with them. Like, they may not seek you out because they may also, I was the first sports dietitian at the University of Central Florida, UCF here in Orlando. And, a lot of the teams didn't know, like, what do we do with her? What am I supposed to do? And so it took a while to kind of get used to, how do we use this person? And so they may not reach out to you because they also have 500 student athletes. And so, you kind of asking them for that help. Now, you said most people, or some, colleges, of course, don't have that sports dietitian yet. I would definitely look in your local community to see if there is a sports dietitian. So you can go to eatright.org, and that is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. You can do find an RD and put in like different specialties, your zip code, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
What you're looking for is specifically that sports nutrition, a board certified specialist in sports dietetics. It's a CSSD is the certification. But, but any registered dietitian also could help. But, we want someone that has that sports nutrition background, ideally. So especially if you have someone who you may suspect an eating disorder, maybe just really having immune system issues where they're getting sick all the time, maybe, getting injured, all that, like any of these kind of red flags of, losing weight, gaining weight, that kind of stuff. So, those are the ones that you want to seek out from the outside. Let's see if we can refer to someone, or maybe someone back in their hometown, parents get involved, that kind of stuff. But if, so those are a couple of options if you don't have someone at your school. But I think it's difficult to not ever talk about food, nutrition, and hydration if you're a coach. I hope you do, and you don't have to have a degree to say, did you eat breakfast this morning? What'd you have?
Yeah.
And just think about those three things that I said. So if they say, yes, I had breakfast and I had eggs and bacon. Okay, well, there's your protein. What'd you have for a carb? Did you have a piece of toast? Carbs are your body's preferred source of energy. And maybe getting a few resources, on hand. There are books out there on sports nutrition. There's only one in existence that I'm aware of that's a tennis nutrition book. But reading up a little bit for yourself, if you don't have that expert that you can have, inform yourself a little bit more around some of the ins and outs of sports nutrition. I'm happy to, be a resource as well. And I can do Zoom calls with individual athletes and stuff like that too. So, there are now that we have a Zoom world, there's opportunity for using people that aren't necessarily even in your own area. But okay, so back to, yes, I think you should talk about nutrition with your athletes. I don't think you should prescribe them a calorie level, a carb level, a protein level. This is how many grams of carbs you should eat, and this is how many. No, that's beyond your scope. But asking them that, what did you have for breakfast? What's in your bottle? Is it just water, or do we have some, sports drink or electrolytes in there? What have you had, to eat during this practice? What are you eating during changeovers? What are you, how are you hydrating? Like, how soon are you eating after practice? Are you going straight to class and then study hall and then 3 hours later you're eating? Well, we want to eat something within 30 to 60 minutes after practices and matches. And so, just some of those like little tidbits, I think, are good things to continue to probe with the athletes, making sure that they're hydrating, making sure, and asking them about sleep and those kinds of things. I mean, I think that is, again, we're part parent, part lots of stuff when you're the coach, and taking care of their physical body is part of your responsibility, and what they're putting into their body in terms of nutrition is definitely something that you should be talking about.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And as a former, I guess, male coach of female players, I guess I was always, very sensitive to this topic, and I don't know if there's any research or studies that have been done out there in terms of how female players are maybe absorbing information from male coaches versus the female coaches, or again, how might you advise male
Yeah.
coaches? You've given us the green light to talk about it, but should male coaches be more sensitive to this, or no?
Yeah, I think there is a sensitivity, even, male coaches to male athletes. I mean,
Right.
male athletes can have, sensitivities around food and body weight and that kind of stuff too. So, I don't think having them step on a scale and, in front of you and all that kind of stuff is appropriate at all. That's where the trainers can come in. They can do body fat percentages. They can do that kind of stuff, and counsel that way. But I do think, and not being a food cop, so like, drop the French fry, don't ever eat, a piece of cheesecake around me, you better not ever have chocolate in your life, like, we don't want to be food cops.
Right.
But I think encouraging the positive stuff rather than hitting the negative, that's
Okay.
what I would say is as broad advice, with especially male coaches to female athletes, not saying, did you have French fries, or, something like that, but rather, hey, did you get some good lunch today? Did you make sure you got some protein, or, are we getting some carbs? We need carbs for energy, just little things like that, I think are absolutely appropriate, to talk about, cross gender. And, but when it gets into weight and what gets in other things, maybe, that's when you pull in one of the trainers, you pull in, someone else, that you can bring in for a conversation around that, especially if it's, eating disorder, someone losing lots of weight or something like that, that you're concerned about, their health and their safety. Definitely you need to have conversations, but I would bring in a third party for those kind of sensitive conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And so again, going back, we talked about access for coaches to sports dietitians, and access to resources in general. And so some of, I was fortunate to work at the University of Oklahoma. We had as much food as, yeah, and I'll get into that in a few minutes as well. Maybe more food than we knew what to do with. We're throwing stuff out kind of things, but we have other coaches who don't have those type of resources, and it comes to match day and they're not able to provide match food, prior to the match, during the match, after the match. So they may have to have traveled long distances to an indoor tennis facility that isn't theirs, and now they're hopping in the van afterwards to get home, and they've not eaten, within that time frame. So I guess my question is, are there any foods, electrolytes, that are relatively cheap, but give a big return on investment? Are there any suggestions there that you have?
Yeah, really good question. The sports nutrition, specifically like sports nutrition products, are not cheap.
Right.
The electrolyte powders and all this kind of stuff is definitely not cheap. But whether you do the fancy brand name, powders and all that kind of stuff, or whether you just go, what, can we get some bananas and oranges? Can we get some granola bars? Can we get some string cheese? Can we get some crackers? Can we get some bagels? Can we get some, like, stick with sort of just real food? It doesn't
Okay.
have to be fancy schmancy stuff. Now, electrolyte powders and, sports drinks, definitely for on court, are something that I would prioritize and say, yeah, we kind of do need to, I don't want to just use sea salt and lemon juice and honey and call it a sports drink. I think that's when, believe me, I've had people, ask about that and all that. But I think it's worth it, when it comes to the on-court nutrition, specifically drinks. But, on-court nutrition for, like I said, banana, dried fruit, some bars. I mean, you can do just regular off-brand granola bars. It doesn't even have to be name brand Nature Valley or whatever. So, I think that there are some things that, so your question was, what would you spend the money on? I would spend the money on the name brand sports drinks.
Okay.
That have the scientific backing around them, maybe some gels and chews and different stuff that are going to be more sports specific for during. But then the before and the after, I think just get some real food,
Okay.
and whatever that looks like, whether it's, pulling into Subway and when you guys get in the van so that we're not driving 2 hours, but we're going to spend an extra 20 minutes getting some subs that we can eat in the van or eat, at the sub place before we, make the 2 hour drive or
Hmm.
whatever. But I think prioritizing, getting something to eat. Subs are always not too expensive and not fast food. I mean, kind of, sort of, but not really. Those are always kind of a go-to. Pasta's always a go-to. Chipotle, oh my gosh, I should have put money into Chipotle many, many, many years ago for
Yeah.
the number of athletes, especially collegiate athletes that eat Chipotle. I mean, those are all great options for, getting carbs and protein, and, for recovery or for, before matches as well.
Okay. And you mentioned that window, 30 to 60 minutes. Is that still kind of the prescribed amount of time?
Yeah, I think that's the ideal, is really 30 minutes to try to get, fluid, some carbs, and then within 2 hours, try to get some protein in there too. And if you want to get all of it within that 30 minutes, that's great.
Hmm.
But, I think especially, after working with collegiate athletes for a number of years too, with collegiate athletes, they've got 2 full-time jobs, as
Sure.
coach thinks their full-time job is playing tennis, but they also have this thing called, academic classes. And so, they might be leaving a practice and going straight to this, that, or whatever, and not have a chance to actually sit down, no meal for another 2, 3, 4 hours. And so I think that's where the timing piece needs to come in, where, you encourage or have in the locker room, a bullet to make some smoothies, or at least some ready to drink, protein shakes and a banana they can take with them until they can go get that meal. Whatever the budget looks like for that. Or if there is no budget for that, then telling them, hey, I need you to bring it
Hmm.
with you so that you're eating, that on your way to class, or, once you get to class or whatever, because you don't have time to get lunch after our morning practice.
Okay. Yeah, my next question is, I'm always interested in this because I know there's so many studies and research, and I think the world of nutrition is complicated, right? Because there's so much noise out there, or at least it's
There
complicated for
is.
me. It's like, this is the diet of the day, and this is what you
Uh-huh.
should be doing, whether it's paleo or vegan or whatever, that's out there and popular, and you end up not sure where you stand. And I guess my question is, over the last maybe 10, 15 years, have there been any kind of best practices that have been debunked, that maybe coaches and athletes are still like, oh, well, this is what we did 20 years ago, and this is still the best practice today? Or are these general rules kind of tried and true, and nothing's really changed over the last, say, 2 decades?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say some of the newer things that have come in, like the whole carb thing. I
Hmm.
always tell my athletes, like, you can't listen to what obese America is being told. Okay.
Mm.
And I don't mean to sound rude when I say that, but we know that, we've got more overweight and obese people in this country than we do not. Okay.
Hmm.
We look at the
Yep.
statistics. And so that's why the diet industry is so strong, because people are wanting to lose weight. Well, you're a collegiate athlete.
Right.
So Atkins diet, paleo diet, whatever, all this stuff is not what we need to be looking at. You need carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not evil. Sugar is not evil. You need it, to
Mhm.
be able to perform. And so, kind of drowning out some of that noise is one of the things that I try to encourage is, don't pay attention to all of those fad diets out there. In terms of sports nutrition, I think some of the things that we've been a lot better at in the past, 10 years or so, is paying attention to those electrolytes, especially sodium content.
Mhm.
I mean, I think, when some of the most popular sports drinks on the market today were kind of made, I don't know when it was, 30, 40 years ago. And the formula hasn't maybe really changed a whole lot, but the science has that, oh, wow, we're losing a lot of sodium
Mhm.
in our sweat. And especially tennis players, if you're in, I mean, I'm in Florida. And so,
Yeah.
we are sweating a lot in the heat, in the sun, in the summer, but even all year round. I mean, it's 87 degrees here today.
Right.
and it's November.
Yeah.
So, so when you're sweating a lot, I mean, tennis players, I think, especially of all the athletes I've worked with throughout the years, are sweating a lot. And even if you're playing indoor, you're still, going to be sweating a lot. And so, making sure that those electrolytes are going to be replaced, I think is one of the bigger, newer, not new, but like the awareness is there a little bit more of like the volume that we're actually losing. Number one thing we lose in our sweat, besides fluid, is salt.
Right.
And so, again, that's where you don't listen to obese, hypertensive America and you go, huh, I'm losing 1,000 milligrams of sodium an hour. I
Yeah.
need to, take some before, I need to have some during, I need to replace after. So, it's okay if I salt my eggs, and I should be salting my eggs before my match or before my practice. And I should be, doing these high electrolyte, high sodium drinks on court. When you're sitting in class, maybe not, but on court for sure. And when you look at the amount of sodium that some athletes need, it's mind boggling when you compare it to the dietary guidelines and, stuff like that. And,
Yeah.
a cardiologist would be like, what? How much are you drinking? Oh, that's horrible. But they don't know that how much you're losing, so
Right.
that's why you want to try to, work with the experts of, what we're doing here. And yeah, you are losing that much, especially our male collegiate athletes that are bigger and sweat more
Hmm.
than women. I mean, women, yes, we need it too, but the males are the ones that are always the constant crampers and,
Right.
needing more of those electrolytes before and during. And that's the other thing that I would say is I've really been working with people recently on the preloading and making sure that you're getting sodium. So not just drinking water in the morning, but drinking those electrolyte drinks before. So maybe not the sports drink, but electrolyte drinks. So things like the Element, Liquid IV, some of these that have 500, 1,000 milligrams of sodium before you even step on court, so that I'm hyperhydrating, I'm hanging on to a little bit more fluid. So then when I get on court and I start losing at crazy amounts, then I've got a little bit on board already.
Got it. And you mentioned sugar there, and this was I was relating to the locker room at the University of Oklahoma. I mean, we get all this food, and I'd look at some of the contents of the food and the amount of grams of sugar in some of these products.
Mm-hmm.
I just was always a little. This just seems a little over the top, but I know these type of products are designed for like you said, they're designed for athletes, not
Yeah.
necessarily the general public who may not be burning as many calories and burning through that sugar and carbohydrates in the same way. But as I look at the lifestyle of many student athletes as well, they're consuming a lot of sugars throughout the day. They go to breakfast and they're having, in some sugary cereals, and then maybe they're getting something from Starbucks that has a lot of sugars. Then they're coming to the tennis courts and grabbing those bars, and then after the fact as well, as they get into the evenings and maybe studying late into the night, and then again kind of consuming a lot of sugars just to keep themselves going. At what point for an athlete is there too much sugar in your diet?
Yeah, I think obviously that's very individual. I don't have a
Sure.
specific number, but what I try to do is have a purpose for the sugar. So if
Okay.
you're going to have a sugary cereal, well, what else is attached to that sugar? There's potentially whole grain. A lot of the sugary cereals now have a lot of whole grain with it. You're adding milk to it, so that's got a whole lot of nutritional value. There may be fiber in there. And so in terms of, so that versus like a chocolate chip cookie or a piece of chocolate cake, I'm looking at it like, well, there's lots of nutritional value in this sugar cereal. And at the end of the day, it's really not that much sugar when you look at like 12 grams of sugar versus like 70 that might be in this chocolate cake.
Right.
So you kind of have to weigh, yes, it does contain sugar, but like how much added sugar is there? And is there anything else of nutritional value that I'm getting with it versus just sitting down with, some
Okay.
fun dip and sucking down, Skittles or whatever. And that, again, and I always tell my athletes, I'm like, it's not that you can't have, you're burning a lot of calories. So yeah, you can have ice cream, you can have French fries, you can have, pizza, but let's just think about is that crowding out other things? And so, you always want to think about also your weight. Am I losing weight? Am I at a perfect weight right now? Am I trying to lose weight? And so that's going to play into it too. That, if you're trying to gain weight, again, not that we're going to eat, nothing but sugar, but we need more calories. And so I am pushing things that are higher calorie, like some milkshakes and, things like that might have more sugar in them. So, and then also it's the when. So if I'm going to have, you need sugar when you're burning it. So sugar to me is like, for an athlete, is the sports drinks. And so that's when sugar is absolutely okay and encouraged is when you're on court. And you need that, that simple sugar from either the gels or the chews or the fruit, dried fruit, or, the sports drinks that are going to give me that energy right away when I'm actually burning it, when I need it. And how much you need is going to be very individual. Again, a 220-pound male versus a 120-pound female tennis player are going to be much different with how much they're burning and how much they need. So I work with, Ironman triathletes, and we're trying to get 90 grams of sugar in them per hour. Like that's a lot, and it's hard to get that. Whereas a tennis player, maybe we're looking at 30, 45 grams of sugar per hour of practice and or, matches. And that's still a fair amount, when you look at like how much Gatorade is that, how much, gel is that, if there's 20 grams, 25 grams in, a gel, okay, how much should I have while I'm practicing? And it takes a little bit of trial and error to figure that out.
Yeah. And then, Tara, what are some of the most common mistakes you're seeing, especially collegiate athletes, that they're making in terms of their daily nutrition? And then, and I love the advice that you gave at the beginning for coaches. I mean, you can't overhaul everything. It's probably not sustainable trying to pick one thing maybe and start making that change. But are there common mistakes that you're seeing? And then how have you helped athletes solve those mistakes, moving forward?
Sure. So, I've worked with lots of different sports throughout my career. And when I started working at the USTA about 5 years ago, the biggest thing for me working with tennis players that I was like, what? was doing something different in practice than they do on match day.
Okay.
So when I would ask people like, okay, what do you do on court? Oh, well, during practice, I do this, but then on match day, I do this. And I'm like, why is that so like drastically different? Like, oh, I only drink water during practices, but in matches, I'm doing, this. I'm like, what?
That's exactly what I did as a player. Yeah.
So what I try to teach is that practice is practice for nutrition as well. And like, right? So, how do you know how that banana is going to sit in your stomach? How do you know how that, sports drink is going to sit in your stomach? How do you know? So, practicing. And by the way, you usually, well, maybe not usually, but a lot of times you're practicing longer than maybe that, that matches. In tennis, maybe not, because sometimes they can be very long. But, if you're not fueling yourself during practices, now you're getting behind day after day after day after day of practice. And then you're not getting that recovery. And then while you're up studying, you're ordering, breadsticks to make up for the fact that I didn't get enough during practice. And now I'm behind. And then you're having it when you don't need it. And, and so that brings me into another common mistake that I see is not enough food earlier in the day. So not enough during practice, but not enough before as well. And, we talked about that recovery right after. So, what we tend to do, and this is what we do as, retired athletes or whatever too, is like, oh, this little breakfast and oh yeah, I had lunch. And then you get home at the end of the day, you're like, oh, I deserve it. And our biggest meal is dinner. And then maybe we snack all night too. And so, that's promoting weight gain versus eating it when I need it. So that
Right.
doesn't mean, all you can eat buffet before you go out on court and you're going to puke, but make sure you have breakfast. Make sure you're having something in your bottle besides water. Make sure that you're having something for, between practice and strength and conditioning, or if they're back to back, that kind of stuff. Like, make sure that you're keeping up with the calories and the fluid during, not just, dinner. Oh, I'm going to recover it all then. Because then now you've got the spare tire around your waist, and now you're injured because your muscles didn't get the recovery at the time that they needed to get that recovery. So timing, I think, is really, really important for athletes, and practice what you're going to do in competition in practice, so that you use the same brand, the same amount, the same everything, so that you can practice that. How's that going to feel?
Right.
If you're going to do that for the first time in a competition, you could be running to the bathroom, you could be puking, you could be, anything, if that's something that's unfamiliar to you.
Yeah. So when you talk about timing, Tara, so let's say there's a noon match, 12 o'clock match on a Saturday. Oftentimes the teams are getting there maybe 90 minutes before they actually play, to start getting used to their surroundings, start their warm up, etc. When should they have had breakfast? If they're going to play, if they want to be at their best by 12 o'clock, when
Yep.
should they have had breakfast?
I would say, like maybe like 4 hours ahead of time is a good
Okay.
time to have a meal. And then top yourself off with maybe that banana or half a bagel or granola bar or breakfast biscuits, or, some of those kinds of I call them crunchy carbs, some kind of carby stuff, whether it's fruit or just easily digested, carby stuff that you can sort of munch on maybe in that 90 minutes, or, 20 minutes, 30 minutes before you go on court. And if you're like one of those nervous stomachs and you're like, I can't eat anything, then maybe drink some sports drinks that have calories, that have sugar in it, so that you are topping yourself off. You don't want to be hungry. You don't want your stomach growling when you're ready for that first serve. And 4 hours from
Okay.
breakfast, you could be hungry. So, have time to digest, but then top yourself off with just maybe some of those carbs and fluid, of course, and electrolytes, so that you can, have that, so that you're replenishing a little bit before.
Okay. And then what about coffee and teas in the morning? I'm assuming you want athletes to stay away from caffeine in the mornings, and focus on hydration, electrolytes, water, etc. Or are there other drinks that they should be staying away from, or having in the morning and leading up to
Yeah.
that 12 o'clock match?
Yeah, well, so NCAA does have a caffeine limit that is, you can get drug tested for that. So you want to be careful. A cup of coffee ain't going to do it. You have to take, a lot of no-dos, or, some
Yeah.
kind of, you have to try real hard to fail the drug test for caffeine. So it's a lot, but I just want to mention that, because
Yeah.
after, working with collegiate athletes, you have to be aware of all the banned substances and rules around that. So I'm gonna go back to say what I said earlier. If you normally have a cup of coffee, if that's part of your normal morning routine, then you have that on match day. And because your body's used to it, that little bit of
Okay.
caffeine might help you. Actually, I mean, it's a performance enhancer, and that's why there's a limit in the banned, the banned substances. So, I don't have a problem with a little bit of caffeine.
Okay.
But it's sort of a misnomer that it's dehydrating. Again, especially if you're used to having it on a daily basis, your body has sort of adjusted to the dehydrating effects of it.
Okay.
You still want to have your water, electrolytes, all that. Don't just drink 6 cups of coffee and call it a day. But if you normally have a cup or two, I think have a cup or two. But I wouldn't also, like I said, have 6 cups, because, oh my gosh, that's going to really get me, because what goes up, what can come down. So, you can crash from that high level of caffeine. I definitely wouldn't do any, and I'm less worried about the coffee than I am about all these, energy drinks. Those are the ones
Right.
that the kids are doing more.
Yeah.
And again, 1 is fine, but 6, not so much. So, be careful with how much you're doing. But I wouldn't be too concerned if you see them doing like a Celsius or, something. I think that's fine. Just,
Okay.
in moderation.
All right. Well, then to cap it off, is there any final words of wisdom or advice that you would give to coaches and their student athletes just in general about their general health and well-being? Is there anything you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah, I think, like we said, as a coach, take care of you. And when you take care of you, you're going to take care of them even better
Mhm.
because you're going to be eating right, you're going to be sleeping right, you're going to be getting your proper, exercise if that's during coaching, if you're a very active coach, or you get your, run in before practice or whatever. But that's really good role modeling. But it's not, you're not doing it just to role model, you're doing it because that's what's taking care of you.
Mm.
And one thing that we didn't really talk about a lot, and it's not really nutrition, is sleep. Sleep, we could do a whole nother podcast just on sleep. But I think that's one thing, especially for collegiate athletes, because again, they've got two full-time jobs. So
Yeah.
they may leave you and still have 6 hours of homework that they need
Right.
to do and studying that night. And you're like, whatever, I'm done with them for the day, see you tomorrow. And you don't realize sometimes what's on their shoulders and on their plate. So I think just being aware of that and encouraging the rest and the recovery and the sleep and asking questions around those things, again, not to be, food cop or whatever, but just as a general, like, I care about you and this is going to affect your performance. And, we got to take care of you as a whole being, and not just, how you're serving and and returning, right? So I think that's, one thing that we can do is just always encourage all of these healthy habits, but then of course role model them and do them for ourselves as well.
Right. Well, it's a really good place to leave it, Tara. Thank you so much. This was very informative, and yeah, I'd love to do a round two on sleep at some point. So I'll be in touch about that. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.